Captain Hyun-woo Kim walked slowly across the metal floor of his ship. The bridge was quiet except for the soft beeping sounds from the computer screens all around him. His crew worked at their stations, checking systems and preparing for what might be the most important day in human history through the big window at the front of the bridge. Hyun-woo could see something that made his heart beat faster. A space station so huge it looked like a small planet hung in the darkness of space. Purple and blue lights covered its surface like tiny stars. Ships of all shapes and sizes moved around it like insects around a bright lamp. This was Nexa Station, the home of the Galactic Council. After 30 years of sending radio messages into space, humans had finally gotten an answer. It was not the friendly greeting they had hoped for. The message was short and cold. Come to these coordinates. Prove you are worthy to join. Hyun-woo looked at the woman standing beside him. Ambassador So-young Park was the smartest person on Earth when it came to talking to other people. She had spent years learning about alien cultures from the few radio signals they had received. Her face was pale, and she kept touching the small device on her ear that would translate alien languages. We have to be very careful, Captain Park said in a quiet voice. These aliens have been traveling between stars for thousands of years. We are like children compared to them. If we make them angry, they could destroy Earth without even trying hard. The captain nodded, but inside he felt angry. Why should humans have to prove themselves? They had built amazing cities, survived wars and diseases, and even learned to travel to other stars, but he kept these thoughts to himself. Today was not the day for human pride. The voice came from the communication system. Captain, this is traffic control. You are cleared to dock at Bay 94. Follow the guidelights and do not deviate from the assigned path. Bay 94 was at the very bottom of the space station, far from the important areas where the powerful aliens met. Hyun-woo had studied the station layout. It was like being told to use the back door while everyone else got to walk through the front as their ship moved closer. Two of the docking bay crew members pressed against the windows to see the other ships. A long silver vessel with no visible engines floated past them like a ghost. That must be a Lumen ship, Park whispered. They are made of pure energy and crystal. Near another docking bay they saw a ship that looked like it was alive. Its surface moved like skin and strange lights pulsed under what might have been its skin. That is a hive ship, the ambassador explained. They grow their ships instead of building them. But the ship that made everyone stop talking was massive and covered in golden scales that reflected the station lights like mirrors. A Vaxi battleship, Park said with respect in her voice. They rule half the galaxies. They docked. Hyun-woo felt the artificial gravity of the station pull at his body. Everything here was bigger, stronger, and more advanced than anything humans had ever built. Workers at the docking bay barely looked at the human ship. They moved with the bored efficiency of people who had seen thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds. That airlock opened with a soft hiss, and the first alien most humans had ever seen in person walked onto their ship. It was tall and covered in green scales that shifted color in the light. Golden eyes looked at them with what seemed like annoyance or maybe disgust. I am Assistant Controller Sketh, the alien said through a device that made his voice sound flat and emotionless. You will follow me to the council chamber. Do not touch anything. Do not speak to anyone. Do not waste time with questions. They walked through corridors that were filled with wonders beyond human imagination. Aliens of every shape and size moved past them. Some floated in the air without any visible means of support. Others scuttled along the walls on dozens of legs. A few were so tall that Hyun-woo had to bend his neck back to see their faces, but none of them paid any attention to the humans. Some pointed and made sounds that might have been laughter. Others just ignored them completely. A few looked at them the way humans might look at insects, interesting for a moment but not worth real attention. The council chamber was so big that Hyun-woo could barely see the far walls. Thousands of seats rose up in circles around a central platform. Representatives from dozens of different worlds sat in groups based on their species. The air hummed with the sounds of dozens of languages being translated by computers. At the very top of the chamber, on platforms that floated in the air, sat three beings that could only be the prime counselors. The first was a Vaxi even larger than Sketh, with scales that seemed to be made of actual gold. The second was a Lumen, a creature of pure light that hurt to look at directly. The third was the strangest of all, a hive queen whose body was covered in thousands of eyes that all seemed to be looking in different directions. The Vaxi counselor spoke first, and his voice filled the entire chamber without any need for amplification. So these are the famous humans, the species that took 4,000 years to crawl out of the mud of their single world. Laughter filled the chamber, but it was not friendly laughter. It was the sound people make when they see something they think is funny but also pathetic. Some aliens made clicking sounds, others buzzed, and a few produced noises that had no human equivalent but clearly meant the same thing. Ambassador Park stepped forward. Her face was red, but her voice was steady. Honored counselors, humanity comes to you seeking friendship and cooperation. We may be young compared to your ancient civilizations, but we offer fresh ideas. And fresh ideas, interrupted the Lumen counselor, whose form pulsed with what seemed like amusement. You still fight wars over imaginary lines drawn on maps. Your people die from diseases we cured before your species learned to make fire. What could primitives possibly teach us? The Hive Queen spoke, and her voice seemed to come from inside everyone's head at once. We have watched your species for many cycles. You are violent, chaotic, short-lived, and pathetically weak. Your technology is laughable. Your fastest ships barely achieve light speed, while our slowest cargo vessels travel 100 times faster. Captain Hai and Wu felt anger burning in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. We may be young, but we have survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and countless wars. We learned to work together despite our differences. This brought even more laughter from the assembled aliens. Several species made gestures that were clearly insults, while others simply turned away as if the humans were too boring to watch anymore. The Vaxi counselor raised one clawed hand and the chamber fell silent. Very well, humans. We will grant you what we give to all primitive species who come begging at our door. You may establish one small trading post in the outer rim far from civilized space. Perhaps in a few thousand years you might develop something of value to contribute to galactic society. The insult was complete and intentional. Humanity dreams of joining the galactic community as equals had been crushed in minutes as guards escorted them back to their ship. Park noticed something troubling on the information displays throughout the station border. Conflicts were increasing. Several member species were reporting mysterious attacks on their outer colonies. Ships were disappearing without sending distress signals. Captain, she whispered as they walked, I think there is more happening here than just our membership trial. Something is wrong. Yonwu nodded. He had noticed it to the way some of the aliens looked nervous when they thought no one was watching. The urgent conversations that stopped when humans came near, the security alerts flashing on screens throughout the station. Whatever was happening, the Galactic Council either did not know about it or did not want to admit it, and humanity, despised and dismissed by the galaxy's most powerful civilizations, was about to be thrown into the middle of Idas. Their ship undocked from Nexer Station and began the journey to their assigned exile in the Outer Rim. None of them could imagine that within months they would be the galaxy's only hope for survival. The beings who had marked them as primitive would soon be begging for the help of the species they had just humiliated. But first, humanity would have to prove that sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all. The barren moon of Kepler 442c looked like a dead rock floating in space. Its surface was covered with gray dust and jagged mountains that cast long shadows under the pale light of a distant star. This was where the Galactic Council had sent humanity to prove their worth, a place so remote and worthless that even the most desperate traders rarely bothered to visit. Commander Te-Hai and Choi stood in the main control room of the human trading post, looking out through the thick glass dome at the empty landscape around them. 50 humans had volunteered to come to this forgotten corner of the galaxy to represent their entire species. Most of them were scientists, engineers, and diplomats, but all of them shared the same stubborn determination that had carried humanity through every crisis in their history. The trading post itself was a collection of metal buildings connected by enclosed walkways. Everything had been built with human technology, which meant it looked crude and simple compared to the elegant alien structures they had seen at Nexus Station, but it worked, and that was what mattered. Yunji Lee walked up to stand beside Commander Choi. She was Earth's most brilliant scientist when it came to studying alien life forms, and she had been learning more about their galactic neighbors than anyone suspected. Every alien visitor to their little outpost was studied, observed, and analyzed. We had another visitor today, she said quietly, a young Lumen trader named Flickerwing. He came to buy some of our handmade jewelry and human music recordings. Commander Choi turned to look at her. What did you learn? Lee smiled in a way that made her look both excited and worried. They think we are so primitive, but they have no idea how much we can see. Their technology is incredible, but it has made them weak in ways they do not understand. She pulled out a small device that showed complex diagrams and charts. The Lumen are beings of pure energy contained in crystal matrices. They are incredibly intelligent, but they have no physical form. They cannot touch things or manipulate matter directly without their crystal technology. And the Vaxi, Commander Choi asked, physically very strong, and their golden scales can deflect most energy weapons, but they rely completely on personal force fields for protection. Take away their shields and they are vulnerable. Dr. Lee switched to another display. The hive species have amazing collective intelligence, but individual drones, we struggle to make decisions without guidance from the group. Mind engineer Jinho Park joined them, carrying a cup of coffee and looking tired. He had been working for weeks on analyzing the alien technologies they encountered during trade visits. The aliens usually tried to hide their technical specifications, but Jinho was very good at figuring out how things worked. Commander, I think I know why they consider us so primitive, he said, sitting down heavily in a nearby chair. Their technology is incredibly advanced, but it is also incredibly specialized. They have forgotten how to adapt and improvise. What do you mean? Jinho pulled up holographic displays showing alien ship designs and technical systems. Look at these patterns. Every species has developed technology that does one thing perfectly but cannot easily be modified or changed. If a Vaxi shield generator breaks down, they need exactly the right replacement parts. If a Lumen crystal matrix gets damaged, they need specialized repair facilities. But humans, he continued with growing excitement, have always been generalists. We build things that can be fixed with whatever materials we have available. We adapt, we improvise, we make do. That is not primitive, Commander, that is flexible. Their conversation was interrupted by alarms sounding throughout the facility. Communications Officer Park Min-ho's voice came over the intercom system. Commander, we have an emergency landing request. A Hive scout ship is in distress and requesting permission to land. The Hive ship that crashed on their landing pad was unlike anything the humans had ever seen up close. It was clearly alive, with a hull that pulsed like skin and organic conduits that carried nutrients instead of electrical power. But something was wrong. The ship's surface was covered with dark patches that seemed to be spreading like an infection. 3 insectoid beings emerged from the damaged vessel. Their normally iridescent shells were dull and they moved with obvious pain. The largest of them, which seemed to be the ship engineer, approached Commander Choi with visible reluctance. We require assistance. It buzzed through its translator device, though clearly it did not want to ask for help from humans. Our bioship has been infected with a viral agent that is consuming its living systems. Dali immediately stepped forward, offering to help, but the alien engineer recoiled. Your primitive medicine cannot help us. This infection is beyond your understanding. But as they watched, the Hive ship continued to deteriorate. The viral infection spread across its hull like acid eating through metal. The organic systems that kept the ship alive were shutting down one by one. Soon the vessel would be completely dead, and its crew would be stranded. Hours passed, and the Hive engineer grew more desperate. Their own medical knowledge was useless against this particular virus. It was something new, something their collective intelligence had never encountered before. Finally, pride gave way to survival instinct. Perhaps, the alien said quietly, you could try. Darlie had been preparing for this moment. She had spent years studying alien biology from intercepted communications and medical databases. Her approach was completely different from anything the Hive had tried. Instead of looking for a cure, she focused on slowing the infection down. Working through the night, she combined human medical techniques with hastily understood alien biology. She could not stop the viral infection, but she developed a treatment that reduced its spread. The bioship would survive long enough to reach proper Hive medical facilities. The engineer drone was confused by what it had witnessed. You used improvisation, it said, as if the word was foreign, combining unrelated solutions, creating new approaches from existing knowledge. The Hive mind does not think in such chaotic patterns. That is exactly our point, Doctor. Lee replied with a tired smile. Word of the incident spread through unofficial channels throughout the galaxy. The story of humans saving a Hive ship with primitive medicine became the subject of quiet conversations and trading posts and diplomatic gatherings. Other species began to look at the human outpost with new interest. A few weeks later, a Vaxi merchant captain named Urzak arrived with a cargo hold full of rare minerals. He had come officially to trade for human art and music, but his real purpose became clear during private conversations with Commander Choi. We have heard stories about your methods, he said, his golden eyes showing curiosity instead of contempt. You solve problems in ways that make no sense to us, yet somehow they work. More visitors followed. Each one came with official reasons for their visit, but all of them were really trying to understand how humans thought. A few even asked for help with technical problems their own experts could not solve. Engineer Park found himself in high demand. Several alien species brought him broken equipment that their specialized repair systems could not fix. Using human tools and improvised methods, he managed to get most of it working again, but the real breakthrough came when a heavily damaged ship dropped out of hyperspace near their moon, broadcasting distress signals in a language that matched nothing in the galactic databases. The vessel was unlike any design they had ever seen, with curves and angles that seemed to shift depending on how you looked at them. The sole survivor was a being that looked like it was made of liquid silver. Its form constantly changed as it moved, and its voice produced harmonics that made human bones vibrate when it spoke. I am Wanderer Velnith of the Forgotten Ones, it said. Once there, translation systems could understand its language. I bring warning of a great danger that approaches this galaxy, Commander. Choi felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of danger? The being form shimmered with what might have been fear. They are called the Shadow Fleet, and they consume entire civilizations, leaving nothing but empty space behind. The attacks on the outer colonies that your council dismisses as minor incidents are not random. They are preparation for something much worse. Lee leaned forward. Why are you telling us this? We are just primitives according to the rest of the galaxy. Nath silvery form seemed to solidify as it focused on her, because sometimes the species that everyone underestimates are the ones who, when change everything. Your people possess something the galaxy has forgotten, the ability to survive and adapt when everything else fails. The alien continued. The great civilizations of this galaxy have become comfortable in their power. They believe their ancient technologies make them invincible, but the Shadow Fleet has destroyed civilizations far older and more advanced. They have turned entire galactic clusters into graveyards. As if to emphasize the point, communications from the galactic networks began reporting more disturbing news. Entire star systems had gone silent along the galaxy edge. Emergency beacons were broadcasting from locations that should have been heavily defended. Council fleets sent to investigate were not returning. Choi exchanged glances with his senior staff. They had been sent to this remote outpost as punishment for humanity arrogance. Now it seemed they might be in the perfect position to see the threat that the galaxy's most powerful beings were too proud To acknowledge the storm that was coming would test every assumption about strength and weakness, about primitive and advanced, about who deserved to survive and who did not. And at the center of it all, 53 months after Wanderer Velneth brought his terrible warning, the galactic communication networks began to fail. One by one, star systems along the galaxy edge stopped sending messages. The great relay stations that carried information across thousands of light years went silent, as if someone was turning off lights in a vast house. Commander Taehyun Choi stood in the communications center of the human outpost, watching the status displays as more red warning lights appeared each day. Dr. Hyron Moon sat at her control station, trying desperately to maintain contact with the remaining active systems. Her young face was pale with worry as she reported the latest losses. Commander, we just lost contact with Rigel Sector, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That makes 15 star systems gone dark in the past week. The Galactic Council was still treating these communication failures as technical problems or minor local conflicts. The Prime Councilors issued statements about equipment upgrades and trade disputes, but Commander Choi knew better. He had served in Earth military for 20 years, and he recognized the pattern of a systematic advance. The first refugee ship arrived on a Tuesday. According to the human calendar, it was a Vaxi merchant vessel overcrowded with survivors from 3 different species. The proud golden-scaled beings who had once looked down on humans now stumbled from their ship in shock and terror. Captain Urzak, who had visited the human outpost several times before, could barely stand when he reached the docking bay. His scales had lost their lustrous shine and his eyes darted constantly as if expecting attack from invisible enemies. Commander Choi personally helped the refugees, while Dr. Yoonji Lee set up emergency medical stations. The stories they told were beyond anything the humans had imagined. They came from nowhere, Captain Urzak gasped, as Dr. Lee treated his injuries. Ships like holes in space itself, dark metal that seemed to swallow light. They did not demand surrender or issue threats, they simply began harvesting. What do you mean harvesting, Commander? Choi asked. Urzak shuddered. The energy beams they fired did not destroy our ships, Commander. They changed them, converted them into more Shadow Fleet vessels. Our own people turned their weapons against us, but their eyes were empty, like they were no longer themselves. Within days, the human outpost was overwhelmed with refugee species that had mocked humanity just months before, now begged for shelter and protection. The humans worked without rest to provide food, medical care, and safe places to sleep. Every available space in their small facility was converted into refugee housing. Dar Lee moved between the different species, providing medical care and gathering intelligence. Each refugee brought new pieces of the puzzle about their mysterious enemy. The Shadow Fleet ships were completely unlike anything in the galactic databases. Their hulls absorbed sensor scans, making them nearly invisible until they attacked. Engineer Jinho Park studied every fragment of debris and damaged equipment the refugees brought with them. Working late into the night, he began to understand the terrible efficiency of the Shadow Fleet conversion process. Commander, he said during one of their emergency briefings, these beings do not just conquer, they transform everything they touch. Ships, weapons, even the crews themselves become part of their fleet. Young communications Officer Park Minho had been monitoring all available transmissions from the advancing front. The news grew worse each day. Entire council battle fleets had engaged the Shadow Fleet and been converted within hours. The greatest military forces in the galaxy were becoming weapons for their enemy, but it was Soo-Jin Kim, a 19-year-old technician, who made the breakthrough that would change everything. She was officially just a junior communications specialist, but she spent her free time analyzing mathematical patterns in the Shadow Fleet movements. Commander, she said nervously during a morning briefing, I think I understand how they are doing the conversion process. She brought up complex equations and frequency analyzers that made even Dr. Lee pause to think carefully about the implications. The conversion beam operates on quantum frequencies that rewrite matter at the subatomic level. But look at these resonance patterns. Soo-Jin excitement grew as she explained her discovery. Every quantum frequency has a harmonic opposite. If we could generate the exact counter frequency, we might be able to reverse the conversion. Process Engineer Park leaned forward with interest. You are talking about building a device that could not only protect us from conversion but actually free the converted ships? Maybe, Soo-Jin said, but we would need to get close enough to test it. And we would need technology from multiple species to generate the required power levels. Commander Choi looked around the room at his small team of humans surrounded by refugees from dozens of worlds. The plan they were discussing was beyond desperate. It was nearly impossible, but humanity had built their entire history on attempting the impossible to work. Began immediately using salvaged alien technology and human improvisation. They started building a prototype quantum frequency generator. The refugees contributed knowledge about their various technologies, while human engineers found ways to make incompatible systems work together. Vaxi energy conduits were connected to lumen crystal matrices using Hive bioorganic interfaces. The result looked like a nightmare of tangled cables and jury-rigged connections, but somehow it functioned. Every species that saw it declared the design completely insane. Dr. Lee worked on understanding the biological effects of quantum conversion, while Engineer Park designed the power systems they would need. Soo-Jin refined her frequency calculations and discovered that the counter-harmonics had to be precisely timed to work as they labored to complete their impossible device. Reports arrived that changed everything. The Shadow Fleet had reached the core worlds, the greatest fortress in the galaxy. A mobile battle station called Eternal Dominion had been converted in less than 1 hour. Communications officer Moon received the final transmission from the Galactic Council headquarters. The 3 Prime Counselors were dead. The Council itself had collapsed as member species fled in panic or were absorbed by the advancing darkness. Commander Choi stood at the main window of their facility looking out at the stars that were disappearing one by one as the Shadow Fleet consumed everything in its path. In the distance, he could see the lights of refugee ships arriving every hour, bringing more survivors and more desperate stories. Jin-Ho Park approached him carrying a portable scanner that showed their quantum device was nearly ready. Commander, the prototype is functional, but we have no way to test it safely. If we are wrong about the frequencies, it could convert us instantly. How long do we have? Choi asked. Moon checked her long-range sensors and her face went pale. The Shadow Fleet advanced elements will reach our sector in 18 hours. Commander, if we are going to try this, it has to be now. Dr. Lee joined them carrying medical equipment and looking determined. We have no choice. The refugees are counting on us. Earth is counting on us. If we fail here, there will be nowhere left to run. Commander Choi looked at his team of 50 humans who had somehow become the galaxy's last hope against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations spanning millions of years. They were young, inexperienced, and equipped with jury-rigged technology that no sane engineer would trust, but they were human, and humans had never known when to quit. Or right, he said, his voice carrying the determination that had brought his species from caves to stars. We go to intercept them. Engineer Park prepared the Soul Pride for immediate departure. Dr. Lee, load your medical equipment and the quantum device. Sujin Kim looked up from her calculations with a mixture of fear and excitement. Commander, what if the device does not work? Then Choi replied, we improvise. That is what humans do. Bestas. Their ship prepared for what might be humanity's last battle. The stars continued to go dark around them, but in the cargo bay of the Soul Pride, a quantum frequency generator hummed with untested energy, representing the hopes of every refugee, every survivor, and every free being left in the galaxy. The Shadow Fleet was coming, and 50 humans with an impossible plan were all that stood between the darkness and the light. The Soul Pride dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima Nebula, where intelligence reports indicated the Shadow Fleet had established a massive processing center. Captain Hyun-Woo Kim stood beside Commander Tae-Hyun Choi on the bridge, both men knowing they were probably flying toward their deaths. Through the main viewing screen, they could see the nightmare that awaited them. Dozens of converted vessels moved in perfect formation around a structure so dark it seemed to bend light itself. The Shadow Fleet processing station was the size of a small moon, with tendrils of dark energy reaching out like the arms of some cosmic spider. Lieutenant Boyong Shin reported from the sensor station. Captain, I count 57 converted vessels, including ships from every major species. The Vaxi battlecruiser Golden Triumph is among them, as well as 3 Lumen light carriers and a complete hive war cluster in the cargo bay. Jin Kim made final adjustments to her quantum frequency device while the rest of the crew prepared for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. Dr. Yoonji Lee monitored the jury-rigged shielding systems they had installed throughout the ship, hoping their calculations were correct. Remember everyone, Dr. Lee announced over the ship communication system, we do not know if our protection will work. The moment we enter their conversion range, we might lose ourselves to the Shadow Fleet. The plan was terrifyingly simple in concept. They would approach the enemy formation, allowed themselves to be targeted by the conversion beam, and hope that Sujin frequency device could not only protect them but reverse the process on nearby converted ships. Engineer Jin-Ho Park watched his instrument panels as they moved closer to the Shadow Fleet. His hands shook slightly as he monitored the improvised systems that were humanity's only hope against an enemy that had destroyed entire galactic civilizations. Contact, announced Communications Officer Park. Minho, they are scanning us with some kind of energy we have never seen before. The lights on the bridge flickered as alien scanning beams swept over their ship. Every human aboard felt a strange tingling sensation, as if something was trying to reach into their minds and rewrite their very thoughts. Conversion beam incoming, shouted Lieutenant Shin. Dark energy struck the Soul Pride like a wave of liquid night. Alarms screamed throughout the ship as hull plates began to shift and change their molecular structure. The conversion process was trying to turn their vessel into another Shadow Fleet ship, but then the Sujin quantum device activated, filling the ship with harmonic frequencies that made everyone's teeth ache. The two opposing forces battled for control of the ship quantum structure while sparks flew from overloaded systems for several terrifying seconds. The outcome remained uncertain. Then the conversion beam faltered and died, leaving the Soul Pride battered but still human. It worked, gasped Dr. Lee, checking her instruments. We are still ourselves. Captain Kim was already giving new orders. Target the nearest converted vessel, activate the frequency projector. The device range was limited, but it was enough. A converted Lumen ship suddenly stopped its mechanical movements as its crystalline hull began to brighten. The crew inside regained control of their own minds for the first time in months. Bright core ETH voice came through their communication system, filled with confusion and horror. What has happened to us? We were trapped inside our own bodies, watching ourselves destroy everything we loved. No time for explanations, Captain Kim replied. Can your weapons function? The Lumen ship weapons powered up immediately. We will burn these shadow spawn from the void. More converted ships began breaking free as the human device influence spread. A chain reaction of liberation started as freed vessels used their own weapons to disrupt the Shadow Fleet control patterns throughout the formation, but their victory celebration was cut short when something emerged from the depths of the dark processing station that made every sensor array scream warnings. A ship the size of a small moon rose from the structure, its hull so black it seemed to absorb reality itself. By all our ancestors, whispered Commander Choi. What is that monstrosity? The answer came through quantum entanglement communication from Wanderer Velnath, whose people had been fighting the Shadow Fleet for countless eons. The Harvester Prime, the consciousness that commands the entire Shadow Fleet. If you can destroy it, the fleet dies with it. Fail, and your galaxy becomes another dead zone in space. The Harvester Prime weapons were beyond anything the galaxy had ever conceived. Energy beams that did not just destroy matter but erased it from existence. Conversion waves that could process entire fleets in seconds. And worst of all, a psychic scream that drove crews insane. With Shin voice cracked with fear as she reported, Captain, it is targeting coordinates for Earth. Hyperspace calculations show it will reach our home system in less than 6 hours. Captain Kim looked around the bridge at his crew, seeing the same stubborn determination in their eyes that had carried humanity through ice ages and world wars. Then we stop it here. The battle that followed would be remembered throughout galactic history. Human tactical flexibility met alien technological superiority in a deadly dance around the dark processing station. Ships that had been enemies for thousands of years fought side by side, united by the common threat of total extinction. Freed Vaxi cruisers used their energy shields to protect damaged Lumen vessels, while Hive bioships coordinated attacks with mechanical precision. But the Harvester Prime seemed unstoppable. Its weapons cut through even the strongest defenses like they were made of paper. Sujin worked frantically to boost her device power, knowing that converting the massive enemy ship was their only hope. But the Harvester Prime quantum shielding was unlike anything they had encountered. The conversion frequencies that worked on smaller ships barely scratched its Need to get closer, she announced over the ship intercom. The frequency delivery has to be direct contact with the enemy core. Lee protested immediately. That is suicide. The radiation levels alone will kill you before you reach the target. Smiled with a mixture of youth and ancient wisdom. Then I guess it is fortunate that humans are too stubborn to know when something is impossible. Captain Kim made the decision that would define the rest of the battle. All ships, this is Soul Pride. We are going in close assault on the Harvester Prime. Cover our approach. The human ship dove toward the massive enemy vessel like a missile, its hull glowing from intense radiation. The crew used every trick they had learned from studying alien combat techniques where other species relied on predetermined tactics. The humans adapted moment by moment. Engineer Park rerouted power through damaged systems in ways that violated every known principle of engineering. Commander Choi coordinated with freed alien crews using communication methods he invented during the battle. Dr. Lee treated radiation sickness with combinations of human medicine and alien healing techniques. They penetrated deeper into the enemy ship. They discovered the truth about the Shadow Fleet. The converted crews were not dead. They were still conscious, trapped inside their own bodies, forced to watch as their hands destroyed everything they had once protected. We can free them all, Sujin whispered, tears streaming down her face as her sensors detected thousands of trapped minds aboard the Harvester Prime. The ship core was a vast chamber filled with machinery that hummed with malevolent purpose. At its center floated a consciousness so alien and ancient that, looking directly at it, caused madness. This was the Harvester Prime true form, a collective intelligence that had consumed civilizations across multiple galaxies. Sujin Kim, 19 years old and supposedly just a communications technician, stood before an entity older than Earth's sun and prepared to save the galaxy. The final confrontation was about to begin. The Soul Pride crashed through the Harvester Prime outer defenses like a burning meteor. Captain Hai Anwu, Kim voice echoed through the ship as they penetrated deeper into the enemy vessel. All hands prepare for final assault. This is going to be the roughest ride of our lives. In the engineering section, Sujin Kim made her last adjustments to the quantum frequency device while explosions rocked the ship around her. She had discovered something during the battle approach that changed everything about their mission. Captain, she called over the communication system. I am not just targeting the ship conversion systems, I am going after the consciousness itself. Da Yunji Lee stared at her readings in amazement. You want to convert the Harvester Prime mind that is either brilliant or completely insane? Maybe both, Sujin replied with a grim smile. But it is the only way to free everyone. The human ship used tactics that no enemy could predict, because they were invented in real-time. Engineer Jinho Park rerouted power through damaged circuits in ways that should have been impossible. Commander Taehai and Choi coordinated with alien allies using hand signals and improvised code words. Dr. Lee treated crew injuries with whatever medical supplies she could find. As they fought their way toward the core of the massive enemy ship, they witnessed horrors beyond imagination. The Shadow Fleet had not just conquered other species, they had trapped the minds of billions of beings, forcing them to watch helplessly as their own bodies committed atrocities. "We can save them all," whispered Sujin, as her device detected layer after layer of imprisoned consciousness. Every converted being in the entire fleet is still aware, still hoping for freedom. The ship core was a chamber so vast it had its own weather systems. Strange clouds of dark energy swirled around machinery that hummed with the power of collapsed stars. At the center of it all floated the Harvester Prime true form. The ancient consciousness was unlike anything the humans had ever imagined. It was not a single being, but a collective of minds from thousands of consumed civilizations, all trapped and twisted into serving the Shadow Fleet purpose. Looking directly at it caused madness, but Sujin forced herself to study its quantum patterns. The entity spoke, and its voice seemed to come from inside their heads. "Young creatures, you have impressed us with your chaos and unpredictability, but you cannot comprehend what you face. We have harvested entire galactic clusters, consumed civilizations that spanned millions of years." Sujin Kim stepped forward, carrying her frequency device. The 19-year-old communications technician looked impossibly small compared to the cosmic horror before her, but her voice was steady as she replied, "Yeah, well, you never met humans before." She activated her device at maximum power, flooding the chamber with quantum frequencies that resonated with the fundamental chaos of human consciousness. The Harvester Prime orderly collective mind recoiled as it was suddenly overwhelmed with human emotions, memories, and dreams. For the first time in eons, the ancient intelligence experienced something it had forgotten: fear. Human thoughts were unlike anything the Harvester Prime had ever absorbed. Other species followed logical patterns, made predictable decisions, responded to threats in ways that vast experience could anticipate, but humans were pure chaos. The consciousness tried to flee, to abandon this form and escape to another part of the galaxy, but Sujin's device held it fast. The quantum field she generated created a cage of harmonics that trapped the entity while bombarding it with the essence of humanity. "For everyone you murdered," she said, pushing the device beyond all safety limits. "This is for every world you destroyed, every life you thought was worthless. This is for my species and every dream you tried to crush." The quantum conversion. The process worked in both directions. As the Harvester Prime consciousness was flooded with humanity, Sujin felt her mind expand to touch every converted being in the Shadow Fleet. She experienced their pain, their trapped souls, their desperate hope for freedom, and in that moment of connection she did something the Harvester Prime had never imagined possible. Instead of trying to dominate or destroy the trapped minds, she offered them choice. "You do not have to be alone anymore," she whispered. "Across the quantum link connecting millions of enslaved beings, you can choose to be free." Throughout the galaxy, every converted ship suddenly stopped. Their crews blinked in confusion as control returned to their own hands. The Shadow Fleet perfect coordination shattered as billions of individuals remembered who they were and chose freedom over slavery. The Harvester Prime death scream echoed across subspace, a sound of pure rage and disbelief. How could these primitive creatures, these young upstarts who barely qualified for galactic citizenship, have defeated a force that had harvested entire clusters of galaxies? As the massive ship began to tear itself apart, Captain Kim ordered emergency evacuation. The crew of the Soul Pride escaped in life pods just as the Harvester Prime core collapsed into a singularity that consumed the entire processing station. But victory came at a terrible cost. Sujin Kim had sacrificed her own quantum coherence to free the galaxy as rescue ships arrived. Dr. Lee held the young woman's hand while her life force slowly faded. "Did we win?" Sujin whispered, her voice barely audibly. "Saved everyone," Dr. Lee replied, tears streaming down her face. "Every single being in the galaxy owes their freedom to you." Smiled one last time. "Good, that is what humans do. We never give up on anyone." 3 months later, Ambassador Soyoung Park stood once again in the Great Council chamber, but everything had changed. Representatives from every species in the galaxy had come to offer their gratitude and respect to humanity. The chamber that had once echoed with mocking laughter now resonated with genuine appreciation. The new Prime Counselor, elected from the freed Lumen Collective, spoke for all assembled beings. "We ridiculed your youth, your apparent chaos, your seemingly primitive nature. We failed to understand that these were not weaknesses but the very strengths that would save us." Ambassador Park looked out at the thousands of representatives and he smiled. "We did not save the galaxy alone. Every species contributed to the victory. But you are right about one thing: we are stronger together than we are apart." The Galactic Council voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership and permanent seats on all governing bodies. Trade agreements flowed in from across the galaxy. Technology exchanges were established. Cultural programs brought alien students to Earth universities while human researchers studied on worlds beyond Map. Perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed itself. The rigid hierarchies and ancient prejudices that had defined civilization for millions of years began to crumble. Young species were welcomed and valued for their fresh perspectives. Innovation became more important than tradition. On the rebuilt Kepler 442c outpost now expanded into a major galactic hub. A simple memorial garden honored those who had given their lives for freedom. At its center stood a stone with an inscription that became famous throughout the known universe: "Jin Kim Human." She reminded us that the smallest voice can change everything. The galaxy had learned that humanity true power was not in their technology or their weapons, it was in their absolute refusal to abandon hope, their ability to find solutions in impossible situations, and their stubborn belief that every life, no matter how small or young or different, had infinite value. The Galactic Council had mocked humanity, calling them primitive and worthless. They would never make that mistake again, and throughout the galaxy, on 1,000,000 worlds in 1,000 languages, children would grow up hearing the story of how 50 humans on a forgotten moon had saved everyone by proving that sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all. Humanity had found their place among the stars, not through conquest or superior technology, but by showing the galaxy what it meant to never give up on anyone or anything worth fighting for. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but it had learned that the greatest wonder of all was the human spirit that refused to accept that anything was truly impossible.